Taking into consideration that second language programs for refugee and immigrant children need to promote learners' cognitive engagement and identity investment in the language learning process, the present study aims to exemplify how this can be successfully achieved through the design and implementation of a language intervention which is specifically designed and based on the identification and analysis of a specific learner's diverse and distinct needs and the use of her identity text as a valuable tool. As Cummins comments, successful language acquisition, especially in the context of language teaching to refugee or immigrant children, is primarily based on teacher-student interactions, which maximize learners' cognitive engagement and identity investment, a fact that can be best achieved mainly by activating learners' prior knowledge and experiences. Equally significant is the development of learners' communicative competence through the use of a linguistic repertoire with all the languages interrelating and interacting with each other, resulting from the development of plurilingualism in language education, which is prioritized by the Common European Framework for Languages. In order, however, for the learner's distinct needs, competencies, and interests to be identified and positively exploited in the language learning process, the conduction of needs analysis is necessary. Such an analysis should focus not only on the learner's perceived needs, but also on objective needs, which in the case of refugee and immigrant children are not limited to the mastery of the language of instruction, but include all the languages available to them. In addition, highly contributory to the needs analysis process is the use and analysis of identity texts created by learners, since not only do they contribute to encouraging learners' identity investment in learning, but also provide significant insight by depicting the practices and strategies engaged by learners during the process of language learning, functioning thus as a valuable tool in syllabus design. Additionally, they serve as a powerful pedagogical tool to promote equity for students from marginalized social backgrounds. The learner of the specific study is a 13-year-old girl of Bulgarian origin, speaking Bulgarian, Greek, and Turkish. She is a pupil of the 6th grade of the Greek primary school, and having attended English lessons for 2 years, has a developed linguistic proficiency in Turkish, but a limited one in English, Greek, and Bulgarian. Moreover, focusing not only on language and communication, but also on societal and integration needs, a qualitative method of research was used. A semi-structured interview was conducted to examine the learner's language speaking and writing competencies, her attitude and feelings towards plurilingualism, as well as her perceived language learning needs. Moreover, her identity text was analyzed, namely a European identity created while participating in a European program implemented at school, and an identity which was written in Greek, English, and Turkish. Finally, additional information was collected through informal conversations between the writer and the learner, as well as through previous observation of the learner's sociolinguistic behavior in the class. As indicated by the learner's answers during the interview and the languages used in the production of her identity text, the learner herself thinks positively of her plurilingualism and greatly values her languages, while her classmates perceived degrading behavior towards her, along with her low literacy skills in the language of instruction, resulting from her previous limited or disrupted schooling experience, account for her feelings of incapability to express herself in the classroom language and feelings of uncertainty and loneliness. Despite her limited literacy skills, she expresses her willingness to learn new languages and particularly acknowledges the usefulness of learning English as an international language that can help her communicate effectively with others while traveling abroad. She wishes to improve both her oral and written productive skills, but she expresses a particular preference and easiness for listening and writing. Although she considers it easier to write in English, she uses Turkish to produce the written discourse while creating her identity text. Taking into account all the parameters of the learner's sociolinguistic profile, A linguistic intervention was designed, and an inclusive classroom practice with a multilingual and multiliterate focus was adopted, enabling the learner to use and express herself in all the languages available to her. At the same time, her attention was drawn to the meaning, form, and use of the languages, raising thus her metalinguistic and intercultural awareness. Firstly, the teacher shows the learner pictures of buildings and places in a town and introduces new words by engaging her in brainstorming and asking her to recognize them, to compare them with places in her country of origin, and if possible, provide the Turkish or English words for them. In this way, the second language input becomes comprehensible, while at the same time the learner's knowledge is valued and her identity is affirmed. Following that, the learner is asked to match the pictures with words, paying attention to the sounds of the first letter in the names of the places, while in the next step she is engaged in a categorizing activity where she has to complete a chart by providing the Turkish, Greek, and English word for several places. During this activity, her attention is drawn to any possible similarities in the phonemic representation of the words in the three languages by recognizing any existing similarities in the written form of the words. In order for the learner to be accurately exposed to the language taught, the teacher shows the learner a map of her own neighborhood and describes it using the relevant words in simple sentences, providing thus her with a model for language and helping her to focus on both meaning and form. The learner's attention is then drawn to the structure of simple sentences used in the teacher's description, and consolidation is promoted by providing the learner with jumbled word cards and asking her to put them in the correct order and make sentences, raising thus the learner's awareness of the structure of sentence. Additional practice in the language is provided in the next step, where the teacher gives the learner a map of a town intentionally designed by the teacher herself, and engages the learner first in a true or false and then in an information gap activity by listening to the teacher's description of the map and completing the blanks in it with the correct place words. Providing the learner with a description in Greek and encouraging her to shift between languages and listen in one language and write in another constitutes a way of involving the learner in intra-language practices, a fact that can facilitate communication and help bilinguals manage their two-language worlds. In the last step of the linguistic intervention, the learner is asked to apply the knowledge required, draw her own map of the place she lives in, and produce as many sentences as possible to describe the place, either in oral or written form, using all the languages she knows. As a conclusion, it is the writer's belief that the present study focused on the examination of a specific learner's needs as highly contributory to the design and implementation of a linguistic intervention, aiming to increase her motivation and engagement and promote the development of her linguistic competency in the language of instruction. The learner's positive response to the implemented intervention and her motivation and willingness to participate in it constitute evidence for the effectiveness of the language lesson described above, despite the constraints and limitations inherent to it due to the short-scale nature of the specific case study. Thank you very much for your time and attention.